The Queen's Last Battle. The boy did not want to go to sleep. Instead, he sat straight up, his pillow crammed in the small of his back. He tugged at his mother's sleeve.
"It's very late,"
said the mother.
"Time for you to go to bed."
"Tell me a story first," said the boy. "Please, tell me a story."
"All right, I'll tell you one story. After that, it's off to sleep with you."
"Okay." The mother sighed. She thought to herself for a moment.
"Have I ever told you the story of how Queen Nanny saved Nanny Town?"
she asked the boy. The boy looked puzzled. "Who's Queen Nanny? And what's a nanny town?"
"You lie down and I'll tell you,"
said the mother. And she began.
"Long ago, life was quite dangerous for people who lived in West Africa. People were being stolen by raiders or captured in wars and sold as slaves. Europeans would buy these enslaved people, who came from places like Ghana, Senegal, and Congo. The traders forced them to undergo a terrible journey across the blue water to unknown lands. So Nanny was taken from her home in Ghana by British men. She was brought to the island of Jamaica, where your grandparents live, and where you know who was born."
The mother winked at her son and continued her story.
"Nanny was sold to a plantation owner in St. Thomas Parish and expected to work for him. What this man did not understand was that Nanny was an Ashanti warrior. She was skilled in both military combat and the mystic arts of Obeah. It was not long before Queen Nanny left that plantation in flames. She and her brothers led other runaways deep into the mountains of Jamaica, where she built Nanny Town.
The mother's smile was spreading across her face.
In Nanny Town, formerly enslaved Africans and the native Arawaks built their own society of rebel warriors. They were known by the British as Maroons. And you know what? Communities of Maroons, or runaways, existed throughout the New World, in places like Brazil, Haiti, Suriname, Cuba, Puerto Rico, St. Vincent, Guyana, Dominica, Panama, Colombia, and Mexico. There were even Maroons right here in the United States, in Florida and the Carolinas. Anyhow, Queen Nanny protected the Maroons at Nanny Town for many years. She also led missions to bring others to freedom. Nanny and her brothers destroyed countless sugar plantations, freeing people, starting rebellions, and stocking up on needed supplies. Queen Nanny was feared by slavers all across the Caribbean. The legends of her military prowess echo even to this day, my dear."
The mother patted her son's cheek. Her smile had dissolved into a dreamy, faraway look.
"Now the English colonists,"
she continued,
"the men who believed they owned Jamaica, they tried to destroy Nanny Town. Well, at first, they negotiated with the Maroons. Very tricky they were. But in the end, they swore they wouldn't allow a leader like Queen Nanny to interfere with their efforts to control Africans on the island. They attacked the Windward Maroons many times, but they could not take Nanny Town. You see, Nanny was a brilliant strategist. She had built her village atop a high ridge overlooking the Stony River. There were only a few ways to cross the river, and the Queen controlled them all. The main path was so narrow that for an army to attack, they had to line up in rows of 2. It was easy to stop an enemy who could only advance 2 at a time. And Nanny herself was the best weapon of all. Legend has it that the Queen never missed a shot on the battlefield. She could take down an enemy soldier from a mile away. People claimed she knew what the enemy was going to do before they did it.
The mother breathed deeply and continued.
It was a cool day in the Blue Mountains. Nanny was enjoying her hike across the dense forest from Cujo Town. She had been visiting her dear brother, whom she hadn't seen in quite some time. Between cups of spiced rum and trays of sweet fruits, Cujo had offered her a warning.
"Beware, dear sister. The British have become more desperate in their attacks. They want nothing more than to destroy what we have built. I believe in you.
Cujo continued.
But I've heard reports from our brother, Akampong, that the British have started using paid soldiers from Africa. Mercenaries who would attack their own brothers and sisters."
Queen Nanny thought about her brother's words as she walked home. For the first time in a while, she was worried, and not for herself. She worried for her beloved Maroons. Nanny sensed something amiss when she reached the gate of her village. One of her lieutenants was running toward her, his face fixed in fear. Nanny already knew what the young man would tell her. Nanny Town was under attack. A group of African men had appeared at the edge of the Stony River. They claimed to be Maroons from Akampong Town. They said they had just come from a successful raid on a nearby plantation, but the British had cut off their escape. They claimed they had come to Nanny Town for help. As soon as the men forded the river, they attacked. They were the Black Shots, a group of African soldiers who were led by a man known as Captain Sambo. Queen Nanny was briefed on the situation by her generals. Taken by surprise for the first time ever, the Maroons could not stop the advance of the Blackshots. They would be at the village center at any moment. Nanny's generals urged her to turn back, around, and escape into the mountains. They told her that even if Nannytown were to fall, she could start a new society somewhere else. Queen Nanny refused. She wept for her people, who would so willingly sacrifice themselves for her. But she was proud. She knew that she could never rebuild Nannytown without them. She decided to meet this Captain Sambo herself. The Queen of the Maroons tore through the village, cutting down any Blackshot who was unfortunate enough to cross her path. The Maroons had been feeling overwhelmed, but they found a new resolve as they watched ferocious Nanny fighting beside them. She pushed most of the mercenary Blackshots out of Nannytown. But Captain Sambo would never leave without something to please his masters. While his men fought and died, trying to escape the Maroons, he hid. He waited until he saw Nanny. As she fought to protect her people, Captain Sambo stabbed her in the back. But it didn't stop Nanny at first. She threw Sambo aside and defended 3 injured Maroons who were caught in the crossfire. Sambo then fled, his legs awash with fear. Soon it was all over. Nannytown was safe in the hands of the Windward Maroons again. What the mercenaries told their British masters when they returned made them sound like the victors. They described Queen Nanny, the old Obeah leader of the Maroons, impaled on a sword. They recounted how she had staggered toward the Blue Mountains, bleeding and collapsing along the way. Surely she must be dead, they insisted.
And was she? Was she dead? Asked the little boy. The mother continued carefully.
Well, that depends on who you believe, my son. Some say Nanny died that day, and that her death only made the Maroons fight harder. No one saw her in Nannytown again, but her memory inspired the Maroons to hold off the colonist forces. Finally, the British gave in, and in 1739 they signed a treaty in which they granted the Maroons their land. Nannytown, or Moortown, lives on to this day. Its people never forgot the woman who gave everything for them. But others tell a different story about Nanny. In their version, the Obeah woman isn't vanquished so easily. Some say she died of old age in the 1760s after a long life of fighting with honor and keen strategy. Still others say she never died at all.
The look on the boy's face was one of perplexed amazement. The mother's smile had returned.